Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of The Big Show. We call it The Big Show because, well, it happens every single day at 5 o'clock, and I am Paul Zeise, and of course, I am here to facilitate and make sure that it goes well. Of course, we do it every day. We thank Archie's, our sponsor, Archie's home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So thank you to Archie's for always being one of our sponsors. Now then, there was a lot of people, and it's kind of hilarious to me that, the first comment today is somebody trying to argue with the idea that we should even talk about Joe Milton. I'll be honest with you. Maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when it was clear when Russell Wilson, I guess, he was probably last week, but when Justin Fields signed elsewhere, there was a lot of discussion about where the Steelers should look. And on these very comments and many other places, we had a lot of people talking about Joe Milton Jr. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. That's the nature of the beast. So to me, I look at Joe Milton Jr. and I basically say, he's a guy when he was or actually he might even be Joe Milton III. But when he was at Tennessee, I don't know. I saw a guy that probably is the kind of player that gets coaches fired because he seems to have ability. He seems to have talent. He seems to have athleticism, all that stuff. But every time I watched him play at Tennessee, I just came away with the fact that this is just sort of a guy who's not really good enough. That's what he is. And so, the fact that now the Cowboys signed him, I don't think it's a loss for the Steelers, or I don't think it's something the Steelers, should have looked into. Even when you look at the deal, I mean, it essentially, the Patriots sent a 7th-round pick in Milton to Dallas for a 5th-round pick. So they basically got a 5th-round pick out of it. I don't know. Do you really believe that Joe Milton is going to be the kind of guy that is going to get you where you want to go? Probably not. And I think that really when I look at him, he looks to me like a guy who has the talent and the athleticism and even maybe the arm strength or whatever to bounce around the league for a long, long time as a backup and as a guy that everybody says, wow, he oozes potential. If we could be the team that just sort of, if we can be the team that sort of taps into that, then, we're going to have a great quarterback for nothing. I just don't think that's how it works. I don't. I feel like it's one of those things where he's just not good enough. And as he is, if he isn't good enough, I don't know. Do you really need him around? I just feel like that's really where we're at right now. And I think that when you look at it from that standpoint, I'm not that big of a fan of his. I just don't know that he's good enough. I never have thought he's good enough. And I think Trevor Lawrence is a guy, if someone asked about him, he's not going to be in play. They're never going to trade him. Why would they trade him? He is a guy who is basically a franchise quarterback for better or for worse. So they're not going to trade him. It's really down to Aaron Rodgers or not. And I think that's the case. I really do. I believe that it comes down to, if you have, Aaron Rodgers in the mix, then you can basically say that it is going to be, he's your guy and you'll be good enough at quarterback. Some people don't think that. I think that. I think you'll be good enough at quarterback. I do. And I feel like it's important to note that, the Steelers are built around, if it's built around it, a guy who's good enough to be honest, period. It's one of those things where I feel like the team built around him is good enough. And if they're good, if they're built around him good enough, I don't think he's got to, in other words, I don't think he's got to be that guy he was, for 10 years. I don't think he's got to be that guy. I don't. I think that at the end of the day, it is going to be really important for the Steelers to just play well around him. That's what I would tell you. And I think that it's going to be really important from a number of different places for them to basically try to go out and make sure they have the best team around Aaron Rodgers. Period. That's what I would tell you. And I think that's where they're at right now. They understand that they don't have the guy. They don't have the guy that was 10 years ago, the guy. Now then, let's talk about some other stuff. When we get really right down to what's happening in the world of sports, the Steelers are the Steelers and all that other good stuff. Someone actually in my mailbag today was asking about it, Alexander Ovechkin, and where he ranks if he's able to, obviously get the 2 goals that he needs in order to make sure that, it's going to, just to try and see, if he gets the 2 goals to tie Wayne Gretzky or the 3 to pass him, where does that rank him? And, it's always an interesting question because the GOAT discussion is always one that is usually very subjective. And I think that's important to, that it is. It's always, very subjective in terms of who's the best, who's the GOAT, who's this, and all that other good stuff. I don't know. I think it's pretty clear here. I think Alexander Ovechkin is probably going to go down as one of the 10 best players in the league, in league history. I think he's probably going to go down as one of the 10 best players in league history. I think there's no question about it, right? And, I think you can basically, if you want to go, the top 5, I think the 3 that are almost always universally in the top 5 are Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, and Mary Lemieux. Gordie Howe probably is number 4. When you get to 5, you know what? There's some people would say Crosby's already there. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. And maybe Connor McDavid will someday be in the top 5 as well. Ovechkin, to me, is a top 10 player, not a top 5 player. Even if he breaks the record, which unless he gets really hurt, I don't know. Unless he gets really, really hurt, I don't see how he's not going to break the record. So I would tell you that, you know what? He's probably going to be a guy who is somewhere 6 to 10 in most conversations. I mean, Gretzky is usually considered the greatest, or Lemieux and Howe are right there with him. And, and there's a lot of people that would tell you Sidney Crosby's right there next. I could live with that. I could live with that list. I think, when you look at other guys, I mean, Jaromir Jagr is somewhere probably in the top 10, right? I mean, it's one of those things where there's a lot of really good players. Ovechkin obviously has, the hardware because he's won a Stanley Cup. He's been in a lot of playoff games and a lot of playoff teams. I'd have to look at where he ranks in playoff goals and all that other stuff. But reality is, if you think about the era that Wayne Gretzky played in versus the era that we're in now, I'll be honest with you. What Ovechkin has done is far more impressive to me than what Gretzky did in terms of scoring goals. And it's amazing, too, if you look, I think, he's got 2 goals to tie Gretzky, and I think he is like 2 less games played than Gretzky did. So, again, unless he gets hurt, I'm assuming even if he doesn't do it now, if he starts out next year, you know what? First game, second game of the season, he'll get the goal, and that'll be the end of it. So, the one thing that I would be willing to bet is if he doesn't get it this year, there's no chance that he's not coming back. He's certainly not going to retire. He's going to get the record unless, he has some sort of major injury and never comes back. Period. So I think that's really what it is with him. He's the greatest goal scorer in NHL history. That's what he will be known as, and that's probably what he should be known as. That's probably the most fair label or fair title to give to him. I would probably compare him to someone like Steph Curry, right? Steph Curry is, there's some people that want to put him in the GOAT conversation. He's not in the GOAT conversation. But what he is maybe is the best pure shooter of all time. And while there's some people that say, well, he changed the game, I don't know that he changed the game. Analytics had dictated that the game was heading in the direction where everybody was just going to go crazy shooting threes. He just sort of was the first guy that really was just fun and dynamic to watch. Regardless, like I said, Curry is on the list of the best players of all time. He isn't in the top 5. And I would say the same thing about Ovechkin. He's not in the top 5. He's just not. Where is he at? It's hard to tell. But probably no less than like 8. Probably no higher than like 7, and probably no less than like 8 or 9. It's probably where he visits. That's probably where he sits. But again, the fact that if you look at the league back in the 80s when Gretzky played, it was a lot more wide open game, a lot more, a lot easier. Not easier, but there were, a lot of higher scoring games. There was a lot less system hockey that slowed the game down and made it more difficult to score. All that stuff is good. But again, when you weigh eras against each other and you look at what Ovechkin's done in his era, that's been probably more impressive than what Gretzky did overall. But Gretzky also has all of the assists and everything else that goes with it. So he's still a greater player than Ovechkin. But I would tell you, he's probably not the best. Ovechkin is not in the top 5. Again, the top 4 to me, and probably in any order, well, I think Gretzky probably has to be number 1 just because he was so absurd for so long. And he's got the hardware, too, to go with it all. You go Gretzky or Lemieux, Howe, Crosby. I'd love for somebody to argue with me about that and tell me I'm nuts. I think it's hard to make an argument against any of those 5. But that's probably the list. Moving forward now, yesterday I wrote a little bit about this. There are people that want the Pirates to buy out Paul Skeens and, see if they can buy out his arbitration years and a couple of his free agent years. Try and keep him here, as long as possible. To which I say that'd be a great idea, but I have no idea why Paul Skeens would agree to that. $25 million a year, $30 million a year. If Paul Skeens is who we think he is, and we get down the road 5 or 6 years where he's entering free agency, and he's 26, 27 years old. I mean, if he does what we think he's going to do, there's a really good chance he could sign like one of these 12-year, $500 million deals. There's no question. So, when I hear people say, well, he gets the money right now. It's a at least he gets the guarantee right now. It's bird in hand, all that. I get all that. So it's he's going to make about $2 million in the next 2 years. But if you do it this way and say you sign him to a 10-year, $250 million deal, he'd get, $25 million, $50 million over the next 2 years as opposed to 2. It's a lot more money. It is, but they wouldn't structure the deal that way. It'd probably be more like $15 million each year, the first 2 years, and then backloaded on the back end. He would get 30, 35 million or whatever. But the reality is, it's not, if you flip it the other way around, his last 4 years on a $25 million deal, he'd make $100 million. He might be leaving 60, 70, $80 million on the table if he does that. So I don't think it's that simple. It'd be one thing if he needs money. He doesn't need money. Him and his girlfriend make a bunch of money. He made a really big signing bonus. They're fine. When Andrew McCutchen and Marte and Polanco did it, it's because they needed money. They wanted money. They wanted the job security. But guys that don't need money or don't necessarily need job security or, whatever, because they already have money, those guys might be a little bit more difficult to do it that way. And here's the other thing. I would be surprised if the Pirates did that. That would be really un-Pirate-like. Think about the Jason Kendall deal and how much that hamstrung the Pirates for 4 or 5 years. Now, multiply that deal by 2.5 times or whatever. That's what we're talking about. I just don't see it. I don't see it getting there. I don't see it happening. I don't know that it's not supposed to happen, but it feels to me like it's one of those situations where it's a hypothetical that isn't really even worth talking about because I just don't see the Pirates doing things that way. That's just not how they do business. Never has been how they do business. Never. All they do, when they look at it, that every single year they would be like, well, now we've got to start with this $25 million player and now build the roster around them. If they want to have a $50 or $60 million payroll, it's going to be really difficult. They're going to have to basically have 24 rookies on them, out there with them every year. So, I mean, it's not something that's attainable. Now, I will say this: the Pirates did a couple of very un-Pirates-like things this week. Bringing up Harrington to pitch yesterday, it was a disaster, obviously. But you know what? I don't need to see some of the other guys that they might run out there anymore. Even Majinski, who's probably a reliever, at least there's upside in terms of maybe he can grow into a starter. And Harrington, that's what you're looking for if you're a Pirates fan. You're just so tired of all the losing and everything else. And that's what I would tell you. It is going to, it's going to happen. And so it will be interesting to see, if they continue to, move young guys up and older guys out. It will be very interesting to see because that's how we want to do it. That's how we would like to see them do it. And at the end of the day, if they don't do that, this team is not going to be all that interesting to watch. For real. And I think that's, what they have to worry about. If they want to sell tickets, they have to worry about that. They have to make sure that this team is somewhat fun to watch. They have to make sure that this team is good enough, to compete, but they need to have enough young players up where people look at it and say, wow, this is a lot of fun. And so that's what it is, and that's what it will be. It's going to be interesting. And by the way, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street, Archie's, home of 80-cent wings. Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. Over the next week or two, there is going to be a settlement that is going to officially happen where teams in college sports will have the ability to opt in. And when they opt into the settlement, they will essentially be opting into a payroll somewhere between $14 million, some, 20 and a half, some even say up to like $22 million. So there's that. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with all these schools. But let me just say this. The biggest problem you have, schools could have stopped this Conferences could have stopped this. Presidents could have stopped this long ago if they would have just been willing to work with the athletes and stop, clinging so hard to the idea of amateurism. But it's going to be real interesting now to see what happens. And it's going to be interesting to see what is the unintended consequences of this, because it sounds good to have $20 million to pay your players. But that being said, it's going to be really, really important nowadays, I think, to get this taken care of. Because they've got to figure out. They're going to have to figure out now how to make this work and get through all the lawsuits that are about to hit over the next, few weeks. When all this stuff settles, there's going to be Title IX lawsuits. There's going to be lawsuits about a cap on salary. There's going to be a cap, the lawsuits about, a number of different issues. But it didn't have to be like this if college athletics had just figured this out long ago and paid players a little bit of money and had a contract or some situation like that. They probably would have been in a much better place than they are right now. People ask me about Pitt. What does it mean about Pitt? Again, Pitt is struggling to pay what other schools are paying. So, I get a kick out of people who think that the recruiting wars that Pitt has lost recently have anything to do with the coaching staff and anything to do with, the facilities and everything else. It doesn't. Bottom line is Penn State is paying, and even West Virginia paying substantially more to incoming freshmen through NIL than Pitt is. You say, well, how do you get Pitt to pay more? Well, they've got to raise more, and that's not easy to do. And I think that's, where this revenue share stuff comes in. It could be a good thing, but I just don't know if it will be a good thing. I think it's going to be a problem, to be honest. And so I think that, it'll be real interesting to see what happens, because in order to make all of this make sense, it's going to be, maybe even a bloodbath of the smaller sports, and that's a shame. And when I say a bloodbath of the smaller sports, what I mean is, in order to make this work, they probably are going to do some things to try and cut expenses. And in order to do that, you're going to have to cut expenses. It means you're probably going to have to cut sports. And that's not a good thing. That's less opportunities. There's less scholarships. There's going to be less money available for, people that aren't among the stars in the high revenue sports. I just think this is going to be a problem. I really do. But I don't know how it's all going to survive when you look at all of the different issues that are going to be brought up. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Revisiting the Steelers a little bit, I think it's interesting when you look at the Steelers from the standpoint of, where they fit in the AFC. I mean, I was thinking about this yesterday. The AFC North, I mean, the Steelers could win the AFC North. I think the Ravens are probably going to take a little step back. They still have Lamar Jackson. They still have a dynamic team. It might be a thing of where they're really good in the regular season again, but I don't know that I would 100% endorse that. But the Steelers, if Aaron Rodgers comes in and is reasonably good, boy, I think he has a chance to be, somebody that puts them over the top. And they could win the division, and if they win the division, who knows what else is there. That's about it for me. Hopefully we'll do it again tomorrow. If not, we'll do it again. Actually, we won't do it again tomorrow because we got the Pirates home opener. But we'll do it again on Monday. Until such time, enjoy your day. Enjoy the rain and everything else. And tomorrow we'll see what happens with the Pirates. And
thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.